Hello and welcome to the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast. My name is Tom Luongo, and we have a lot to talk about. This is episode 45, and Seattle is back in the news. Why? Because Seattle is now moving to completely disperse its police department. I'll give you my thoughts on that in a minute, but first I want to remind you that you can follow my work at my blog at tomluongo.me. You can follow me on Twitter at TFL1728. Live streams, they happen every Monday night at 8 p.m. and every Friday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time on YouTube and DLive.tv. Just search for me on both platforms and you'll find me. Warning, I am a bad boy, I have a potty mouth, and I use those words in sentences. You can also support the podcast by downloading and installing the Brave browser. Now, Brave protects your online privacy by blocking all those pesky data snoopers, ads, and tracking cookies which feed the growing surveillance state. Moreover, you can earn crypto tokens called BAT for opting into Brave's ad network and use them to tip your favorite content creators who, like me, are verified publishers on the network. Be it a favorite website, YouTube, Twitch, or SoundCloud channel, click the Brave logo icon to the right of your search bar to tip your earnings and directly support the content you love through those earnings. They're like YouTube Super Chats, but without Google taking a 30% pay cut, and all you pay for is your time. Lastly, you can join the more than 450 people who support me directly on Patreon at patreon.com/gold, goats, and guns, where you can sign up for the twice-weekly market reports covering current events and the technical state of important markets like gold, Bitcoin, oil, the Dow, the Euro, and others. And you can sign up for the Gold, Goats, and Guns monthly newsletter, which ties up all the cultural, geopolitical, and economic shifts and trends into a coherent portfolio strategy designed to help you make sense of a world going mad. All right, intro over. Now on to the podcast. So we're now talking about post-Chaz Seattle. And given that, the Seattle City Council has moved to defund its racist police department. And according to the legislation, the Seattle Police Department perpetuates racism and violence. It upholds white supremacy cultures and is to be replaced with a, quote, Department of Community Safety and Violence Prevention. And the cops are to be replaced with community-led activities and to focus on de-escalation skills as opposed to using violence to enforce government edicts. Now, there are many issues wrapped up in this proposal, and I'm going to get to a few of them and what I think they all mean, because what's clear here is that they're moving very quickly from one incident in Minneapolis, George Floyd, to a complete indictment of the police. And the question is why? And there are a lot of theories that I have as to why this is, and probably all of these theories are partially correct. So let's start with the obvious one, because I think it's the one that makes the most sense if you take a broader picture here, a broader look at the entire thing. And that is that this is a political stunt which runs parallel to how the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, is game planning not only the election in November, but the future of the U.S. in general. There is an open insurrection against the current government. Nancy Pelosi, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and everybody have bet the farm, along with Silicon Valley and various Democrat mayors in major cities around the country, have gone all in on trying to remove Donald Trump from office. We have open insurrection and undermining of Trump's authority within the Department of Defense, the FDA, the CDC, the WHO. Obviously, China has a hand in all of this as well. At a certain level, what we're seeing in Seattle is a tactic within the grander strategy of trying to remove Trump from office. So all across the Democrat-led urban centers from New York, Chicago, Atlanta, Portland, Seattle, Minneapolis, they're all declaring a kind of independence which is designed to escalate the uncertainty of the future of the United States. This is to fit the narrative that I talked about in a recent blog post that the U.S. is splintering under the weight of the fascist Trump, and to accelerate the decline of the United States and its centrality to the world's financial system. This is just one of the smaller tactics that they're using to weave a grand strategic web of propaganda and the big lie to achieve this end. And the goal of all of this is to transfer the seat of power in the West from Washington to Brussels. And I'm going to continue to pound this point home until I get it through everybody's head, because that is the plan. There is no other plan here. It is to remove the potential for democratic overthrow of the future technocracy led by a globalist elite that's got ties to China, as well as old European money and old American institutional money and all of those people. what I like to call the Davos crowd. The people who meet at the World Economic Forum in Davos every year. They're what's driving a lot of this. And they're preying on people's anxiety about police brutality, the fall of our society, and the disintegration of our society, and trying to accelerate that and gaslight everybody into this state of, well, we should just let the United States go because it's fundamentally racist and it's fundamentally unfair and it's a fundamentally terrible place. That's not going to fly, by the way. So that political strategy is clearly what's on the table here. And if they can remove Trump from office and they can regain control of Washington, D.C., and then continue along with that plan. And they're hoping that they can get the election in the U.S. to validate this strategy and to validate this thesis that they're presenting to you ad nauseum, ad infinitum on such platforms as CNN, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, MSNBC, Fox News, and all the rest of it. That's what the media is there for. But at the same time, as I said, this is also a fundamental reaction. Why are these people doing this? Why do they even think that America is such a terrible place? Well, it's a reaction against the multi-generational arming of the police. It's a reaction against a multi-generational descent of our society into a kind of police state, which civil libertarians like myself, and there's hardcore libertarians like myself, have been complaining about the entire time, right? So all of this is downstream on the war on drugs. It's downstream of the post 9/11 Patriot Act / Military Commissions Act and the authorization of use of military force that's been abused by now 3 presidents, spanning almost 20 years in places like Afghanistan, Syria, to a lesser extent, even things like Ukraine and all across the Middle East, Iran, and wherever else we have inserted troops or inserted our foreign policy bona fides all around the world. The most powerful person during the Democratic primary debates was Tulsi Gabbard because she was fundamentally against this. And of course, she had to be quashed by the establishment DNC, even though she was a principled person who could reach across party lines, in theory, to unite the party against Trump. They wanted to play the games that they were playing, which is, no, they really just wanted control over who was going to adjudicate the far-flung global empire of the U.S. while bankrupting it at home at the same time. This is downstream, again, like I said, of the war on drugs, the Patriot Act, the Military Commissions Act, the nearly 20-year Afghanistan war, the war in Iraq. It's downstream of the Supreme Court creating limited immunity for politicians, cops, and judges. Downstream of all of these things that have created a milieu of ascribing and handing more and more and more power, surveillance power, warrant power to the police, more power to the prosecutors, more vectors for potential corruption of prosecutors, judges, cops themselves. Cops warned about this all the way back when we were talking about the Clinton crime bill back in the 1990s, when they first created 100,000 federally funded police officers. I remember arguing with my dad about this, who was NYPD. We weren't really arguing, we were discussing it. And we said, now we've got people on the NYPD whose loyalties are not necessarily to the NYPD, to the city of New York, but to Washington. And so it's clear that they've used George Floyd to create an overreaction for political purposes. But it's deeper than that. It's even deeper than that. I was talking with Whitney Webb on a previous podcast, I think episode 43. I was chatting with Whitney Webb about this, and I brought this point up, that it's the people's willingness to allow this to happen comes through the constant anxiety that they live in as a population that every day lives closer and closer to economic extinction. Every 4 years, there seems to be another financial crisis of some form or another popping up out of nowhere that needs to be dealt with, and that the Fed can never see coming, and that the politicians don't know how to deal with other than to print more money. These things come with startling regularity since we've gone on this dollar reserve standard that's untethered by gold. Corrupt money begets a corrupt society, and slowly over the course of now 2 generations, we've just printed money to create whatever it is that we need. So first we overspend on social issues, and then when that creates societal unrest because it's exacerbating the debt, hollowing out the middle class, yada, 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 we then have to turn around and it starts causing crime. We then have to up the amount of money we throw to the police and the military in order to stop the violence. And this is ever escalating layer upon layer of violence. And we add layer upon layer upon layer of legislation, which supports the ever increasing violence. So when you look at this situation, you see people being fearful, fundamentally fearful. What drives so much of our politics today, especially on the left? That there are 44 million people without health insurance, or there's this, or there's that, or there's all these people living below the poverty line, and we need a living wage, we need universal basic income. Those are all reflections. Those are all statements of people who live in fear of being one random incident away from absolute destitution. And it expresses itself across the political spectrum in different ways. And we sit back, as libertarians, and analyze these systems and say, but the problem is not more government, not more legislation, not more power to the police, but less. We don't want to give them more power. We need to give them less power. We need to take money out of politics. Too much money in politics is the problem. More money in politics isn't going to get us out of it. Politics, I always say, got us into this mess. It's not going to get us out. It's the absence of politics and the restoration of individual responsibility that's going to get us out of this. So generously, when you look at people like Mayor Jenny Durkan in Seattle and the Seattle City Council, they're not wrong that they feel there's something wrong with our policing, that militarization of the police is a real problem. The potential for corruption alone is unacceptable in anything approaching a definition of a free society. But the root cause is not in blaming the police themselves. They're just a scapegoat. They're just enforcing the rules that we place upon them. They're caught in the middle between politicians overpromising benefits and overprescribing regulation and legislation as a cure to what ails us. These are costs borne by everyone, and the cops are caught enforcing laws which are nakedly tyrannical as the society labors under the weight of the expanding gulf between the politically connected and the politically disconnected. In the recent podcast, I talked about the concept of a narco-tyranny. That disconnect is not specifically racist in nature, and that's where the Democrats are wrong. It's seizing this issue upon racial lines. This is where the Seattle City Council is wrong by seizing this and calling it a fundamentally racist thing. Got news for you, people. There are plenty of poor white people in America. It comes from a ruinous monetary, fiscal, and tax policy which makes sure that wealth rolls up to the upper classes and stifles class mobility and makes it very, very difficult, if not impossible, for people to get out of the lower classes and off of welfare and into the productive middle class. It takes a Herculean effort and a supreme act of will to do so as you climb over massive tax hurdles of marginal tax rates between 300 and 700% to go from lower class to middle class. And then say, okay, I'm finally making enough money that I can breathe a little easier. And the first thing the Democrats want to do, raise your taxes on the middle class. That's what they're threatening to do when they get back into power. So what will fix the problem of the police is lowering these burdens. The politicians of Seattle are reflecting what drives people towards the insanity of things like Black Lives Matter and Antifa. They want a fairer system. They want less anarcho-tyranny. They think they want more freedom, but they don't understand that with freedom comes tremendous responsibility. You know, Stan Lee always said in all the Marvel comics, with great power comes great responsibility. Nonsense. Great freedom comes great responsibility. You have to be responsible for yourself because no one's going to bail you out for your bad decisions. No one's going to bail you out when you piss off the wrong person and they punch you in the mouth. And you can't go running screaming to some liberal judge who wrote a rule and a city council that wrote a rule that says whoever throws the first punch goes to jail. Like, no. When you're an asshole, sometimes you need to be punched in the mouth. And right now, we're seeing that play itself out. That rule allows Antifa to go out and collect wounds, to do wound collecting, to scream in people's faces, but not actually hit them, so that if somebody hits them back, they can scream victimhood. Nonsense. You were abusing me verbally, emotionally, physically, and in every way, and screaming in my face. Excuse me, dude. You're going to lose some teeth. Because that's what would happen in a truly polite society. Someone would put you down, just like I watch my dogs enforce behavior within the pack. I see my goats enforce this behavior within the pack. You get uppity, you get shirty, whack, you get whacked upside the head. And they work it out. And during the Chaz days, remember every time you saw some video on YouTube or TikTok or whatever, and you saw someone get attacked, what's the first thing that everybody says during those street videos and someone's bleeding on the side of the road? Where are the cops? Call the cops. Like, no, dude, you're in the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. You are the cops. What are you going to do about it? That responsibility means truly respecting what other people need and want while acknowledging that they can turn on you in a heartbeat if you're an asshole. Hence, you need to be able to protect yourself. The gun debate is over, right? Background checks in July were up 86%. Gun stocks are at an all-time high, or at, almost all-time highs. Like, we're selling more guns than we know what to do with. As I've mentioned before in other forums, I go to look for guns online. If I want a snub-nosed 38 for self-defense that I can carry, good luck. What normally would cost you $250 or $300 might be $450 or $500. Go check the prices of things like a Taurus Ultralight 856 on Gunbroker, if you can find one. These are guns that a year ago you could find ubiquitous through Shadow for $250. They were giving them away. Now you can't find them for love nor money. But, if you want a replica 1873 Colt Peacemaker, single action only revolver, they're in stock for days. But a real self-defense gun, good luck. So it's about learning to defend yourself. It's about having enough sense not to put yourself in a position to be aggressed. I'm not just talking about walking down the wrong alley. I'm talking about structuring your life and accepting that everything that happens to you is a result of your own actions. And that you are nothing more than a victim of your own bad choices, not somebody else's repression. So Antifa wants to go out there and collect wounds. Well, you shouted in somebody's face and you called them horrible names and you were an asshole. Boom, you lose some teeth. That's what will happen when they do that to me. I won't even think twice about it. Of course, I'm smart enough to know that since I'm going to do that, I don't put myself in a position to allow myself to be aggressed by Antifa. I'm not stupid. I'm not traveling to Portland as a journalist to get yelled at so I can punch people in the mouth and have my wife film it for me and I can make 500,000 followers on Twitter. No. I'm not wound collecting. I'm looking for solution. Now, because if you look at where we are today, we're not ready for the kind of freedom that dispersing the police and reworking them as community crime investigators or dispute resolutors, which is what we need. We're nowhere close to that. You can't go from where we are, nigh onto a police state, to this kind of anarchic thing overnight. You got 2 generations of children who don't understand consequence. They don't accept responsibility for anything they do. Everything's the cop's fault. It's the society's fault. It's not me. I'm the goody. They act the way they do because they fundamentally believe to the core of their being that they can't possibly be a bad person. They act as if you disagree with them, you're the fascist. It's pathetic. So how are people going to de-escalate anything? Okay? They're going to turn over Seattle to these people who believe these things, who have never properly integrated their shadow in Jungian sense, who don't believe that they're capable of becoming concentration of intenders, or that they're the guy in the experiment who will be happy to hit the button and cause the other person who can't see them pain. Like, they don't believe that. Guess what? We're all that guy. So we're not going to solve anything today by getting rid of the police in Seattle. They're a symptom of the disease of socialism, of slowly but surely collectivizing all the means of control and means of production. They are a reflection of the world we've built, and if they're the problem, the fault lies with us, not with them. So don't scapegoat the cops. It's not going to change anything. It's only going to make things worse. But then again, it'll also be an object lesson in how not to go about fundamental change to society that is necessary. And maybe it'll wake a lot of people up in the political center in this country to go, you know what? We've seen what their ideas are, and we reject them completely because that's not what we want. See, as a libertarian, I always get accused of being libertine. There's a fundamental difference between being a libertine, which is, anything I want to do is fine. Well, it's true, it is, but the consequence is that no one may or may want to deal with you. So if you're an asshole, guess what? You may be an asshole by yourself. Yeah, you're free to take and ingest whatever drugs you want or whatever food you want or whatever you want to do. It's your responsibility to do so in a way that you can still function and take care of yourself. And if you can't take care of yourself and you're that nihilistic that you don't want to take care of yourself, well, it's nobody's responsibility to take you and help you go forward and clean yourself up. And you may just drown on your own. Because if you find yourself in a position where no one wants to help you improve yourself, and you don't have any value to anybody else, you're going to wind up naked by the side of the road. And that's a shame. So it goes back to what I said earlier. It's about responsibility, taking responsibility for yourself and putting natural brakes on your own behavior, because that's what society is. Yeah, society is tyrannical and patriarchal. It's tyrannical. I don't know whether it's patriarchal or not. It doesn't necessarily have to be. But it's definitely tyrannical. It's why an armed society is a polite society. I'm all for putting people strapping guns to their hips and walking around the world again. Because that's the world we live in. That's how dangerous the world we live in actually is. Because we've fallen so far. The police aren't going to be there to help you. You know, when seconds count, the police are minutes away. That is true. And everybody just found out about that. And the IYI set, the intellectual get idiot set, that term coined by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, the IYI set are all out buying guns. See, the police are supposed to be there as an abstraction for personal defense. So we only need police as a means by which to try and insert some level of society where at the edges of society where it breaks down. But we're really supposed to be self-policing all the time. And for the most part, we do. But we have people who are going out of their way to take that choice of self-policing out of our hands. And they've been doing it for a long time. And it's only made things worse. But it's not the cops' fault. It's ours. So now what are we going to do about it? This has been the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast, episode 45 for today, August 4th, 2020. If you like what you heard today, please give a like and subscribe down below. Follow me on Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, you name it. And we'll see you soon. You guys take care. We'll talk next week. We'll talk next Tuesday. Be well. Keep your stick on the ice.